Now let's go through a monopsony and let's learn about how a minimum wage could affect this company. So here I've got a graph, the same one you've just seen. So MC is higher than the average cost, and that was because of the two rules that we have just learned. The monopsony has to pay the new workers the new salary, but they also have to pay all the previous workers the higher salary to match that new worker. And these two rules are going to mean that the minimum wage has a really interesting impact when applied to a monopsony. So here I have the graph. We've got workers 0 to 7, and I've got that in a table. Worker number 1 is willing and able to work at that dot, which is wage 2. In this hypothetical situation, worker 2 is willing to work at 4. Worker 3 is willing to work at 6. Worker 4 is willing to work at 8. Worker 5 is willing to work at 10. And so on. And you can see they're willing to work on their supply curve. So let's say a minimum wage is introduced. And let's say that the minimum wage is going to be higher than the current wage. So the current wage is going to be determined by rule 3, that the monopsony is profit maximizing. So the monopsony sets MC equal to MRP and is going to choose to hire 5 people, and it's going to hire them at the minimum that they can accept. So these 5 people are willing to work at the minimum at 10. So that's the current wage. Let's say that's too low, and let's say that the government wants to aim for a wage at least of 12. So this 12 is going to be the new minimum wage. So let's apply this. Worker number 1, let's assume that the monopsony wants to hire worker 1. It's going to have to pay the new worker, so that first worker, it's going to have to pay them legally 12. Then rule 2, it's going to have to provide a pay rise to any previous employees that don't work at 12. And there are no previous employees, so that is 0 for a pay rise. And that means that the total cost of hiring this first person, so the marginal cost to the business, is 12, giving us a marginal cost of 12 of hiring that first worker, which I'm going to draw in green. That first worker is costing the company a 12, and there is the dot. Let's repeat for the second worker. The second worker was happy to work at 4. Now, if they were to be employed, they have to be working at 12. So let's write that down. And then rule 1, the new worker has to be paid at 12. So that is the cost to the business. Rule number 2 is they're going to have to raise the wages to any previous workers. But the previous worker was also paid 12. So there's no pay rise required. So that's still 0. And the marginal cost of hiring the second worker is 12. And that means the cost of hiring the 12th worker is, second worker is 12. It's another green dot there. And let's repeat, the third worker was happy to work at 6. They have to legally work at 12 if the monopsony employed them. And there is no pay rise required because everybody was also working at 12. So that means the third worker is now costing 12. And hopefully now you're kind of seeing a pattern. The pattern is, so long as people are willing to work at a wage lower than the minimum wage. That's what these 3 people have been wanting to originally. That's going to mean that they will all end up working at wage 12. And the monopsony is going to face the MC equal to the minimum wage. So let's check this again. So the fourth worker, yes, they were willing to work at 8, but now they have to work at 12. So the monopsony to hire them has to pay 12. no pay rises are required because everybody so far is working at 12. And so the marginal cost is 12. So here we are up to the 4th employee, and the 4th employee is still working at 12. Even the 5th worker was, again, still willing to work at 10. So now they have to work at 12. And the marginal cost of hiring the 5th worker is now this green dot. And the 6th worker was willing to work at 12, so the cost of hiring them, that can be 12. No pay rises are required, everybody's still working at 12. And so the marginal cost is 12. Now the 7th worker is different. The 7th worker is different because they are actually not willing to work at the minimum wage. That's still too low for them. The 7th worker, as you can see here, they were willing to work at 14. So to hire the 7th worker, if the monopsony wants to, has to pay them 14. And now we have the pay rise problem because we have 6 workers that are being paid 12. So we have 6 pay rises to do. Each of them have to be paid an extra £2. So that means the cost of hiring this new 7th worker is 14 plus the 6 times 12, which is 28. And now we're back to our classic monopsony kind of behavior of the MC, where that 7th worker is going to cost a lot more than you paid the 7th worker because you've got to give that pay rise to all those other workers. So that's where our marginal costs would be 28. And so let me kind of illustrate the shape of the marginal cost that we're kind of getting to now. It's really interesting. So everybody's getting paid exactly the same until you get to that 7th worker. Oops, not the eraser button. And then from that 7th worker, your MC jumps up and returns back to normal. It will keep kind of going back to normal because all the other workers weren't happy to work at the minimum wage. So all of them, you'll face that standard monopsony behavior where you'd have to give the pay rises to all the workers, and that's what drives your MC up. So your MC has done this really interesting thing. It's called a discontinuity. It's kind of jumped from one point to another. To work out the average cost, we need to go to calculate the total cost. So we're nearly there. Grab a great color. So the total cost, we can add up all the costs to hire all the workers so far. So the first person cost 12 to hire. And the second person, another 12 to hire. So the total cost is now 24. Add another 12 and you get 36, 48. This next worker cost another 12, which is 60, another 12, which is 72. And now you've got to add 28. So this is now 100. From this, we can work out the average cost. So to hire the first worker is 12. So I'm just doing 48 divided by 4 equals 12. That's 12 and that's 12. And we see something really cool here, that so long as everybody is being paid the minimum wage, we've learned that that equals your MC, so all the people who are willing to work at that, and it also equals the average cost. So if I repeat this on the graph, that first worker has an average cost of 12, which is all the way over there. That second worker, again 12. That fourth worker, on average 12, keeps going to 12 even after the sixth worker. So we've learned something really great, that so long as everybody is willing to work at the minimum wage, everybody's happy to supply themselves at the minimum wage. To draw that a little bit better. And that's the supply curve so far. These are all the people who are willing to work at a lower wage rate than the minimum wage and now have had to push to be employed at 12, and that makes sense. That 7th worker was a little bit different because they were not willing to work at 12, they were happy to work instead at 14. So the firm has faced a total cost now of 100, and there are 7 people. So this is a 14, roughly speaking, their average cost. And that is over here. And if you were to repeat this for more workers, you would find that the average cost of hiring these workers has actually turned out to be what we would expect, the original monopsony average cost curve. So the conclusion is a minimum wage causes your supply and your MC to be at the minimum wage for all the workers who are willing to work at or below the minimum wage. And I hope you found that really useful. This is really interesting. This varies depending on how high the minimum wage. The monopsony is still profit maximizing. So to work out how many people they employ, set MC equal to MRP. The MC is now the green one, so maybe I should put this in green. And the MC equals the MRP around there. So that's how many people will be employed. This monopsony is going to want to hire that 6th person. And they're going to pay them the minimum, so on the supply curve. So they're going to pay them 12 and they're going to hire 6 people, which is really curious because they've actually managed to hire 1 extra person, even though the minimum wage is going higher. If the minimum wage went up even higher, I'll do another video on this. You might find that employment increases, you might find employment decreases, and you might find that it stays the same. So it varies, but go through this method and you will find how the minimum wage impacts the monopsony. Okay, hope you found that useful. Please leave me some comments if you like the style, and if you have any other suggestions, please subscribe if you are interested in getting notified if any new videos are released.